Well, all right. First things first, happy International Women's Day to any and everyone here in this panel, but also like to your friends and family and anyone out there. Thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful day to dive deep into all things of confidence and leadership. In order to break the bias, we've asked for support of 4 fantastic guest speakers for this event. But before we go into detail, I would like to just introduce or just provide you a quick overview of today's session. So shortly after my little speech about like the young professionals, we're gonna provide an update on the also like an introduction of the young professionals. I hand over to Lucy, who's facilitating the panel discussion and also planned the entire event. Please give her like a clapping hands emoji because we probably cannot hear you as you're probably muted, which is like the best practice for those virtual events. And yeah, I hope now we can see all those clapping hands emojis in the chat coming through. Please, yeah, do so. Thanks so much, Lucy, for planning this event. Great stuff. Yeah, so we will have the panel discussions for between like 30 to 40 minutes with a Q&A session afterwards. And if you have any questions prior, during, or past the panel discussion, please write them in the chat and we address them accordingly. After the Q&A session, we will have a brief wrap-up by myself, and eventually I'll hand over to Julia, who provides you with the updates about the mentor program. Last but certainly not least, I'd like to let you know that we have decided as a committee to donate all the proceeds of this event to New Zealand Red Cross that supports the Ukrainian refugees. So having said this, I'll jump into the next slide. So basically, for all the new faces here, I'll just briefly introduce you into what the GNZCC Young Professionals are all about. So we aim to build bridges between cultures, growing an inspiring network, and focus on the connection between German and New Zealand business communities. We have ambitious goals for us, but also for you and your environment. 2 focus areas are building and expanding our and your professional network, but also raising cultural awareness. I think that's like just a brief overview on the young professionals. And now I'd like to hand over to Lucy, who's moderating this afternoon's session.
Hi, thank you, Marcus. I would like to quickly introduce our panelists for today's discussion. Let's start with Katja. Katja Litz is the General Manager, Urban Planning and Design at Kaingeorda. Katja is originally from Germany, as I am, but she has spent the majority of her life here in New Zealand. She works in property development since 12 years, and I'm sure she has some tips for us how to show confidence in a male-dominated field. Welcome, Katja. Amita Mistry is Managing Director at Bayer New Zealand. Before Amita moved to New Zealand in 2016, she worked for Monsanto in Singapore and Australia. She's an executive sponsor of Bayer's Inclusion and Diversity Working Group and will share some insights from her personal journey with us today. Hi, Amita. Nice to have you here. Burko Sanel, CEO of HSBC New Zealand. Burko has a background working in the financial sector and moved to New Zealand during the pandemic last year. She is with HSBC since 16 years, and I'm excited to hear what changes in regards to female leadership she has witnessed since then. Hello, welcome on the panel. Kate Visconti, founder and CEO of 5-2-Flow. Kate joins us today from the United States. As the CEO of a certified woman-owned small business, her core purpose is fostering an engaging and inclusive workplace. Kate is a change management expert and loves supporting young professionals in their career development. Welcome, Kate. So I think we could just get started with our panel's discussion. So what we have done, we have pre-prepared some questions for you, and we will definitely have some time at the end. So our audience can ask some more questions. So the first question we have is, the pandemic has taught us to be flexible and amend plans. Have you ever come across an obstacle in your career path, and how have you dealt with this challenge? At the same time, when do you need to be inflexible and not bend your life and values for a job? I was wondering, Amita, would you feel comfortable answering this question based on your background and your personal experience?
Sure, happy to. Nice to meet you all. I think let's just take a step back about looking at the flexibility, right? Yes, our life and the way we work and how we have made those changes in our work plan in last 2 years is very prominent everywhere, in every profession. But I can say from my own experience, flexibility and the different work arrangement was always there as long as I remember, right? I think it comes down to a couple of things. So let me just break it down. So first and foremost is when we have a role in an organization that is attached to the deliverables and what we bring to the table, but it's just not 9-to-5 job, as I like to call, right? We work for an organization for what they stand for, what we stand for, our value. And you talked about value and inflexible. I'll touch that on later. But why we join the organization and what we can bring. So we have a role and deliverables and objectives to meet, right? Second is our work is calling to our teammates, and I like to call them mates. I've learned that word in New Zealand. Our team members, our managers, leaders. So it's just a chain, right? It just not stops at us. So when we talk about and think about, look at the flexibility and how we want that, what we want that, I think it's really important and it's fair to ask as an individual to look at it. How does my work affects this entire big picture of what is my role and responsibility here? Certain time, there are deadline and commitments. So if I have to manage something, how would that affect what cascading effect it will have over the wider goals and deliverables, right? Deadlines and everything. And I'm sure all of us have experienced those deadlines. Something was due yesterday, right? So we have to look at this holistic view and then come up with the plan, how and what I will do that will impact the overall outcome. And I think that calls for a really honest and a clear and transparent discussion with your manager or a leader. I can tell you from my own experience, most of the time it works out because manager or a leader, whoever you call it, they are a human. They understand the needs of other human being. That's my first starting point, right? And sometimes it may not work out because they would also have some deliverables. They would also have some situation. For example, I would think about that if there is a project which required 5 people's contributions and one person would like to work at a different hours, which have a cascading effect on the final deliverables, then that may not be possible. So, and then we can find a solution. So, but I think what I would encourage is have an open mind and have that conversation. I'm a big fan of Brené Brown and David Susan, and Brené Brown says, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. So when we are not coming out with the very clear message about what is my deliverables, how can I achieve that, and how that will help me to reach my goals and my organization goals in a shorter period of time, I think that is, I'm sure it will work out. It will be a most welcoming discussion any manager would like to have, right? And you touched base on, and just before I go on the values and all, from my own experiences, I have never had that situation where I put forward some request and I did not get a support. At the same time, I was very reasonable. Now, the definition of reasonable can be different. Let me take an example. If we have a full-time role and if we want to do a part-time role, probably discuss with your manager, is there opportunity for a job share? I have seen that happening. And that was wonderful especially for a young talent who want to have a family, or want to come back part-time role. Can we have a job share, right? I also have witnessed where you have to go for a couple of medical appointments at certain point in time, but then that doesn't mean that I'm just not going to look at what I need to deliver. So just have those mindset and have those clear discussion, right? And most importantly, I think you talked about values. I can tell you from my own experience, defining your value, it's a very interesting exercise. I highly encourage everyone to do it. And your starting point could be, again, my famous author, Brené Brown. She has amazing resources on her website. And I think that really helps, because when you are very clear about values, that defines what you stand for, who you are. And then you again look at your strength. What are you passionate for? Because the combination of all these things helps you define what career I want to go for. What are my professional aspirations? How do I connect with people? So there is a lot more. I'm happy to talk about this. As some of you may know on the call, this is my favorite topic. So I really encourage you that before, as I said, that have a very clear idea, have a very realistic expectation about yourself, and have a really clear and transparent communication. And my favorite line is communication and common sense. With due respect, communication is so fundamentally important when we are working in a professional environment, and you'll be very surprised. Sometimes we just make a story in our head, but it just doesn't transpire that way. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to take any other questions you have. Thank you.
Lucy, would that be okay if we just jump in as well?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. So I completely agree with Amita here. I think it's really, really important to have an understanding about your contributions and where you sit within that puzzle, and how your contributions actually affect the rest of the organization, obviously aligning to your values, the purpose of the organization, and the mandate, depending on what the organization might be going through at that period of time. But I think the other piece that I wanted to add is, like, as you progress through any organization, you will see that your job becomes what you a little bit make out of it as well. I think it's very easy for us as humans, it's human nature to think about what everyone else needs to change, or we kind of think that the change needs to happen kind of elsewhere and we come in. Whereas potentially kind of Martin Luther thinking, I don't have the quote in mind, but just be the change that you want to see. And I've seen that quite a lot in my experience, where I was drafting my own JD, like my own job description for a role that I thought should have existed. And then after kind of a couple of months or even like a year, you kind of see like, well, I'm doing all this, like who else was doing it before? Because there is so much to do, so much to pick up on. And I think as you progress, depending on your aspirations and so on and so forth, preferences, you will find that the definition of job is really what you a little bit make out of it as well. I think coming maybe to the confidence of today's scene as well, be confident in your creativity, abilities, capability, and just be out there, just being the change that you want to see as well.
Yeah, I love that. I love both of your recommendations. I'm a big fan of Brené Brown myself. Her podcast, Dare to Lead, is just awesome. I can highly recommend it. And I love the idea of, writing your future job description. It's kind of about visualizing what you want to have in your life, I guess. And, I'm a big yogi and I love meditation, and this is like also about like visualizing what you want to have in your life and visualizing all the good to come, and then it actually happens. Yeah, great.
I think if I could just chip in there, I think there's another part to it, and I think Amita and Burku touched on this in terms of communication. I think certainly as I've grown older, I've kind of more realized that it's not the case that your boss or anyone else has got the master plan for where things go. So when you see those gaps and when you see what should happen and what you would like to do to take the organization forward, talk about it. Like, don't sit there waiting for someone else to work it out. Like, just put yourself out there and put those suggestions forward. And similarly, I would say is be really clear with people around what your career ambitions are, what you would like to do next, because if you don't tell them, don't rely on them guessing it and singling you out for a particular role. So I think, and I think that is one of the key challenges, because I think we become more comfortable doing that as we get older. So I think for the younger among you is, take those opportunities, talk to your colleagues, talk to people you come across about, where you want to be in 5 years' time, and, take the initiative.
Thank you. I love that tip. It's sometimes hard. It's easier to say it than to actually do it, from my personal experience. But yeah, it's a good tip. Thank you. Kate, do you have anything to add, or should we move on to the next question?
I actually do, but I didn't know if we were out of time on that question. Yeah, so for me, when you mentioned being a change expert, I think one of the things that I've learned with obstacles and that part around inflexibility in your life and values, I'm also a huge Brene Brown fan, love Simon Sinek, Start With Why. And so I actually drew a change model around this, around what can I change within myself and what am I willing to compromise, or am I sitting here complaining? Or can I help change my environment and change my colleagues around me to get to a better environment? There was this awesome calculation that a professor told me called E plus R equals O, the event plus your response equals the outcome. And so he really taught me around that response to that, if I'm able to help massage the environment, and then if I couldn't, that it might be time for me to leave if it wasn't something I was willing to support. So I love what everybody said, agree wholeheartedly. I'm over here taking notes too, so thank you everybody for those. I love it.
Thank you. Oh, great. Cool. Well, let's move on to the next question. So when I was at uni, we were told that complementary qualifications and relevant work experience are required to actually have a career or make a career. But nowadays we see more and more that people change their careers along the way. And I'm wondering, has any of you had a career change throughout their life? And how do you make previous experiences count in a new field?
I would love to start with that one. So I know I just was on for the last one, but this is basically my story and why I was really excited that you asked me to be here. So I started out as a high school English teacher in rural Ohio in the United States. Very low paying job, very tough environment to be in. And from that point, I decided to get a job as a trainer at a bank. Within that bank, I moved around quite a bit, took a lot of different interesting roles that led me to learning about a tool called Salesforce. Some of you have probably seen it. It's probably in the background of some of the backdrops they're building. And so I became a global tech consultant. After 12 years of being a global technology consultant as an undergrad English major, I have started my own company as an entrepreneur. And so there are a couple of things I wanted to share when I saw this question preemptively in the panel that I thought would be super important and actionable tips on how you go from a high school English teacher to running a global business and switch from, liberal arts to technology. So one of the biggest things I wanted to share about that story is how I changed so much. One of the first things I did is a fun story that actually all of you are sort of doing right now just by being here tonight. So kudos to everybody for being here. I know it's your end of day, and this is just one of the key things, is to always seek information from other people who have really wacky stories. So I started thinking about this when I was in the bank working in tech. And I was telling this story the other day, which is how Marcus found me for this panel. And I found all of these notes, and there are, I don't know, like 50 pages here of handwritten notes of 45 people I interviewed when I hit a sticking point in my career. And I did this like practice networking and informational interviews, because everyone on this call, everyone you meet in your career has the most fascinating, weird journey, but we all look at each other and think we took a very prescriptive set of steps and can't go do the next thing until I've done these steps. So I want to dispel that myth right now. Some of us started in very different places and will end up in very different ones from where we are now. So just a quick thing to think about: those core competencies that you have in whatever role you're in now, whatever you're studying, whoever you meet with, those core competencies can be applied to lots of different roles. I also want to make sure that as you're networking and within a job that you might have now, how important credibility was. So this interview with a man named Jim gave me a job on the spot to come run mortgage marketing when I had no mortgage experience and no marketing experience, just based on my reputation in the organization. I learned so much in that job that I started doing some kind of side hustles and volunteering to learn a little bit more about what I was doing. And from that point, really just kind of created my own journey. So I just want to, again, reiterate, dispel those timelines or journeys that you think are very linear for people, and really go out, meet people, screenshot this webinar and connect with everyone on here on LinkedIn if you're not already, and just say, hey, I'm interested in your career. Can you tell me your story? So that's a little bit about me. Sorry if I ran over on that.
No, thank you so much for sharing. I love your story. It's incredible, and it really motivates, it really motivates me and hopefully others to step out of their comfort zone and try something new.
Yeah, it's an amazing journey.
Yeah, I think that was very inspiring, Kate. Thank you very much. I didn't know that detail, and yeah, it was very inspiring. I think just maybe to add kind of my spin, I think for me, as well as in the context of HSBC, which obviously is quite a big kind of a global organization, which gives you the ability to actually change careers, but in the context of the same organization. So it's a little bit like a different spin potentially. I think the focus has always been on transferable skills, so core competencies kind of the skills that you can just transfer over, but also the right balance between the kind of the hard or kind of the technical skills versus your soft skills. Coming back to maybe how Amita addressed the first question around the importance of communication. Those there are some soft skills that are more difficult to teach or more difficult to develop, but technical, we believe that anyone can just kind of upskill themselves kind of rather quickly. And I've done, before actually moving to New Zealand, I was a part of our global trade and receivable finance, so our trade business in London. And before I went into that very specialist trade product team, I always had a little bit more like a generalist career around focusing on clients, client coverage, and so on and so forth. Again, all in the context of HSBC. But when I moved to trade, I remember I used the analogy about like I felt like I'm an organ transplant to a new body. I was so different. And I was just saying, okay, we just have to see whether the body is going to evacuate me and just or adapt me, because I was just so different. But the trick or the beauty was actually about that difference, because that's exactly was what the team was actually looking for. So it a little bit comes back to how Amita kind of defined or redefine kind of the puzzle and where you fit in. It's really important to understand what the organization or what that team you're about to join in that period of time is looking for as well. So you might not have the technical skill, or you might not have but there is something that you can actually bring to the table, and maybe that could well be what they are looking for. So again, just maybe coming out to my shout out from the first question, like just be out there. Completely agree with Kate, like have those conversations. You never know where it will lead. And just it takes effort, but just be out there and have those conversations.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really encouraging.
If I can jump on a little bit here, something similar to, but so I also had an international career with Monsanto, moving from India, a couple of roles in Australia, a couple of roles in Singapore, and now in New Zealand. and it has been a different journey, starting from a commercial finance and now ending, or rather coming to an end of an accounting. So I had a whole spectrum of finance, and now with an MD role as well. So I completely agree with what both of them have shared. Please put it out yourself. And I think the tips, 2 tips I can talk about it. Technical skill. I remember when I started career way back, and over the period, like SAP knowledge is must, or this system knowledge is must. It's very easy to learn. And why it is easy to learn, it comes down to what attitude you have towards the learnings. So keep an open mind. Attitude is really, really important, right? Fixed mindset. So I would challenge, I think you mentioned how you are going to challenge yourself to come out of your own comfort zone. Oh, I don't know this, or should I know this before I try this? I think that's gone are those days. So just put it out there and be very open about it, that I don't know, I would like to learn. How can I learn it? Because I'm sure a lot of organizations and there are leaders out there who are more than happy to share knowledge. I am happy to reach out. And the other thing is also comes down to, I like to call it as attitude and aptitude, right? So are you open to a different culture? So I moved around across different culture, and the way you do certain things, even from your professional aspect perspective, and the way you interact with different individuals, it's different from country to country. This is also a skill. So all of you, most of you who are coming from Germany to New Zealand, which is a very diverse country. I've been into Singapore, which is a full of different, culture aspect and all, and you learn a lot from there. And that's where you build the connection. So I think thinking your career professionally as one after another, or this comes after that, there is a really great book by Tara Moore. Highly encourage you to read, Playing Big. And you do not have, she talks about one of the experience that you do not need to learn Japanese language to make a move from US to Japan. So just do it. You never know, just put it out there, as Barshu mentioned. So it's really, really important that have an open mind and challenge yourself when you want to kind of come out of your comfort zone. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing those insights. Just aware of time, so I guess let's just move on to the next question. So you will come from quite male-dominated industries, actually, finance, construction, pharma, and we can still see the, especially in the upper management, it is quite male-dominated, or it appears like that. So we're wondering what kind of changes you have witnessed over the last years, or since you work in those industries, in terms of female leaders in the workforce.
Maybe happy to start with finance, if that's okay, Lucy. Yeah, so yeah. I think, again, I don't have first-hand experience in all these sectors, but I can certainly talk about, I suppose, my views and experience in the finance sector. So things are for sure progressing for quite a bit, but there is still a lot that can be done, and it's good to see the progress. I've started my career with HSBC, and before that I was with JP Morgan for a couple of years. So I've been a banker for about 20 years or so now, and looking at kind of the journey, which for sure is quite a long journey, but looking at it, there is, I think the first thing to notice is we're certainly much more talking about things. So really acknowledging that there is a challenge. So if you even look at the kind of LinkedIn today or social media on IWD posts, it's just all out there, which I personally think is very, very positive. There is an extended effort to publish more data, and where possible to be a little bit more transparent, a little bit more granular around it. So and that's really important. So it all starts with acknowledgement. Then the aim is really to create that visibility. The third piece that I personally have noticed is that there's a lot more effort to hold senior leaders or management teams or boards to account. So really a lot of effort to make sure that gender representation targets are set for senior leadership scorecards. For instance, as HSBC country CEO, I do have gender representation in my scorecard. So there's really a big effort to hold everyone a little bit more accountable. And I'm a big believer what gets measured gets done, or at least has a higher probability to promote the right behavior. So out of all this, we then, throughout the time, have created more gender equal policies to be able to support males and females achieve their ambitions. When I look at the recruitment, we pay quite a lot of effort to have a gender balanced candidate shortlist. We train, everyone goes through, every hiring manager goes through a mandatory training to make sure that they don't have unconscious bias through the recruitment process. We make sure that we kind of read through our job adverts just to ensure that any language or any words is actually not biased. So there is an extensive effort. There is also a lot of effort around talent programs. So one of the key things about equality or kind of gender balance really is to be able to create the pipe. Because if we don't actually create the pipe, the numbers and the progress will not be there. So there is a lot of focus that I have seen over the years to really focus on female talent and helping them a little bit more accelerate through the organization. We have, for instance, within HSBC, a program called Accelerating into Leadership and Accelerating Female Talent. So I've myself have participated in some, and I'm also a cohort coach or a sponsor for some. So those programs really help our talent, whether female or any kind of minority focused talent, to where we can actually hold their hands and help them a little bit more accelerate by either sponsoring them, advocating them, really cheering up for them when they're not in the room. So it really works well. And all these are changes that I've seen in the past. I mean, I've been in the industry for about 20 years, but really in the past, I would say 5 to 10 years, more so. So really an accelerated focus on all this. But one of the things that I've seen being focused on, and I do see that in the HSBC context as well, is to focus on inclusion. So we do talk quite a bit around diversity and inclusion and think that they're a little bit more interchangeable. So we use it quite kind of like D&I or kind of like all together. But diversity is still challenging, but it's about numbers. So there is a pathway to achieve with scorecards, with recruitment policies or balanced recruitment policies and so on and so forth. But inclusion is one where we focus quite a bit as well. And I've seen that change happening. If diversity is, let's say, 5 to 10 years, I think inclusion is really last couple of years, getting more and more focus, which I personally think is very positive. It's really about the speak up culture, and it's really about the bottom up feedback or that 360 feedback that needs to happen in organizations to make the change happen. So I think all, just to kind of maybe sum up, quite a lot underway, and I've personally have seen a lot of changes happening, which I think is very positive. Are we there yet? For sure not. But we are on track, gradually making those changes. So yeah, quite a bit, Lizzie.
Thank you. It's quite a lot what your organization is doing, and that's quite impressive. And I think, you know, I wish we could just put it out there and inspire all the other employees to do something similar. Amita, I was wondering, do you want to add something? Because I remember that you are on a working group that focuses on inclusion and diversity. So do you have some insights from that working group?
Sure. I think proud to say that Bayer board has made a commitment about the inclusion and diversity, and and we have a target. However, it's not just about having a male and female ratio. For me, diversity is much more than a male and female discussion, right? Because it's a diverse view, experience, and how we are including all of that. It's a very, very big piece. So very pleased to see our company has committed on those goals and working towards that by 2025. In fact, we had a session last week within ANZ Town Hall, within the ANZ business, and we invited a lot of views. I shared a couple of stories of my own experience. I think I just don't think that this is just in a simple words, I can say it's not just one person. It takes all of us. When I say all of us, our male counterpart, everybody in organization, we have a role to play here, and we have a role to support each other and drive because this is a journey, as rightly was you mentioned. Policies and process and metrics is one thing, but you do not want to do something to reach the metrics. You absolutely want to, for example, want to hire a candidate. That person gets the role based on the skills and diversity that person brings to the table, not just because of the gender. So I'm very conscious about that. And I think there is a lot of work needs to be done, and it takes all of us. That's what. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just having time in mind, let's just maybe move on to the next question, which plays into the topic about female leadership and confidence. So from my personal experience, I definitely look younger than I'm actually am, and sometimes I have the impression that I have to kind of prove myself to earn respect. And I was wondering, did any of you ever find yourself in a situation where you did not feel taken seriously or felt disadvantaged? And what's your tip to radiate confidence?
All right, I might start with that one. I would say quite frequently, I think probably, I would be quite surprised if there was people on this call that didn't quite frequently feel, that they weren't particularly confident. I think what I've kind of learned as I've gotten older, and I think it's really important to keep this in mind, is that you might not feel confident and you assume everybody else is confident, and that's just not the case. I think everybody is a little bit freaked out below the surface. And some of, as I think, again, as we get older, we get a little bit better at hiding that. Perhaps we get a little bit more comfortable with being not confident, with being a bit nervous. Like I, for example, was nervous coming onto this call today, and I'm good with that. It doesn't bother me. I'm just going, there probably would be something wrong if I was to speak in a panel and I wasn't at least a little bit nervous. So I do think that that it's just really realizing that most people have confidence issues, and just because they present really convincingly doesn't mean they're any more confident than you. They've just put on, I suppose they don't know that you're not confident potentially either. The other thing I think it's really important, and I do think, because it is something that's about first impressions, but not all of it is about first impressions. There's nothing actually wrong with people knowing that you're nervous, and I think we should never confuse confidence with competence, because the minute we do, it kind of all goes terribly wrong. I think we've all, imagine a lot of us have worked with people who just radiated confidence, but they didn't actually have a clue about what they were doing. And often that, ended in tears. So I think there's also a lesson around perhaps being too confident, and that's not always a good thing. Yeah, so I think that's probably my main comment on it. I think in terms of the just sort of going back to the theme and the previous discussion, again, it's the impact on your confidence if you're different to everybody in that room. And I think that can be because you're the youngest person there, can be because you're the only woman there, it could be because you're the only older person there. It could be because you're the only person there of color or of a different background, or perhaps, your English isn't as good as the next person. So I think that is also something that everybody needs to be aware of, and just making sure we don't make people, feel unnecessarily nervous about the situation. Yeah, I think that's probably most of my comments. I'm sure some of the others have similar experiences to share. I might just finish up with, just in terms of the situation in my industry, which is, construction development, very male dominated, very full of big chest beating egos. And I think it's actually quite a good experience to kind of walk into that world and not be quite like them, and the appreciation you get from people, because there's a lot of people certainly in that industry that don't actually like that culture, but it takes someone else to sort of step in for them to actually say that, So I've had a lot of people say to me over the years that the fact that I was a female in a male dominated, somewhat, brutish environment at times was good, because it stopped people from behaving really badly, So yeah, that's a little anecdote.
Yeah, oh, thank you for sharing that. I feel very better now because I was very nervous joining this call.
I love that. I'd love to share a little bit too. So I literally defray it immediately. And I love that, Katya, what you said is like being the different person in the room sometimes can be what you're terrified about the whole time. So like when I lived in England and when I lived in New Zealand, I used to get some feedback sometimes that I was too American. So I just started defraying anyone's judgment on it by coming into the meeting and going, I'm too American in America. Make everybody laugh and say, if I say something that's weird or like doesn't match your culture or use a term people aren't used to, at PwC, we used to stand around and laugh about what are pronunciations or terminology that were different, and it just disarms everyone. And so we can have a laugh, we can understand that the difference I'm bringing to the room can actually add value. And I think that that's the interesting thing, going back to the last question, or if people aren't taking you seriously, is you were invited to the room for a reason. And if you were truly a diversity hire, you wouldn't have made it into the room. I wouldn't have even wanted to take that role if that were the case. So I think in consulting, when you're traveling all around the world in multicultural situations all the time, in tech, predominantly male dominated, almost every meeting I still have. So it's nice to be on with a bunch of ladies, but gentlemen, thank you so much for joining, because it's so cool to have a diverse group to bring different perspectives again and just look at something in a completely different way. I often think about like children who are very curious. And so when I'm the least confident in a situation, I will also start out with a question and approach the entire situation with curiosity, because then you see everyone's shoulders in the room go down and like, oh, thank goodness she asked that question, because we were all wondering, but none of us wanted to ask because we would look like we didn't know the answer when we think we should. So I love being curious and silly sometimes. So Katya, thank you for sharing your story, because I can relate.
Thank you. Okay. We have so much more questions, but we also really want to give everyone else in the call the opportunity to, you know, ask and fire through what they have on their heart. So just pop in your questions in the chat and we see how many of those we can get answered for you.
Or if you just feel more comfortable, just raise your hand and just talk.
Yeah, unmute yourself, ask your questions. But don't worry, I have more questions to ask, so I can cover for you. So maybe I start with another question, and in the meantime, you can just think about what you want to know from the panelists. All right, and this question might interest some of you. So there's still a gender pay gap, and studies have shown that men appear a bit more confident in salary negotiations. So we were wondering, have you ever struggled with asking for promotion, a better remuneration, or further training? And what do you think is like the number one tip you would give your younger self when preparing for a discussion or negotiation with your manager?
I can go first here. Very quick tip. The way I look at it, salary negotiation, the gender pay gap, it's a huge topic, and there is so many data behind that. So let's park that for the time being, yeah? But if we just look at it, how do you approach? Because I think I want to remind everyone, and I always remind myself, salary negotiation is not just about what you take home, what you get on a monthly basis. Is much more than the entire benefits and package when you work for an organization. So I got a really great tip a while back that rather than looking at that, look at what are the development opportunities you have, what are the training opportunities you have? Where do you want to advance your career? How can the organization support? How does your own advancement and your aspiration of training fits into the organization's overall footprint as well? So I think my one tip is take a very holistic view. It's just not about the $1 which you see on the paper. It's much more than bigger discussion. And as I mentioned, the gender pay gap and all, it's a very, very different topic. We keep seeing a lot of articles and research around that, but there is a lot of scientific data behind that. So I think that we can park it for another day. It's a big topic.
Yeah. Thank you. I really like the angle you're coming from and saying, seeing as like the whole package and not just what you have in your bank account at the end of the day. I really like that.
Maybe I can jump here. I think I want to come back to Kate's magic formula in terms of E plus R equals O, because to be honest with you, that's my life formula. And I think one kind of advice that I would just tell to my younger self is just teach the formula much earlier on. I think I've learned it a little bit too late, but it's, I think whether it's kind of a promotion conversation, a pay, it's just some conversations are obviously just a little more harder, right? Because it might not be an easy thing to do, an easy conversation to have, or an easy thing for the employer to kind of change or do, right? But I think just be mindful about what's the outcome that you want to drive out of that conversation. Are you going in to inform the counterpart? Are you going in to escalate something? Do you need approval? Is it so really just being a little bit more mindful about why you're having that conversation, and being a little bit more targeted. If it's an half an hour about, okay, how do I kind of use this time to be able to drive the outcome that I want to drive, and a little bit maybe planning ahead. So it's really about my magic formula as well. And I think that will be the one line that I would certainly give as advice to my younger self.
I love that. I'd love to add one thing too that I think is fascinating in today's environment with how short-staffed a lot of companies are. So there's a little bit more power now in the negotiation. But my favorite thing to do when interviewing is completely turn it around about, I know I'm the prize here. You all should know you're the prize here because you're seeking professional development. So I would actually try to figure out why it is I should join that company. You have so many choices in this journey, and it's very easy to turn an interview around and then turn that negotiation power to you. So I highly recommend you come to interviews equipped with questions that aren't just about salary, but what can your company do for me? And I'd like it with Amita, like, what is the whole package? If you're not hearing that, I'd really love for you to think about how they start selling the company to you and see how valuable you are. And then they're coming back to the table with a higher salary to make sure you want to come there.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing those tips. I feel really well prepared for the next interview. Well, we have received 2 questions. So the first question is from Catherine. So how do working moms best deal with obvious discrimination because they are working part-time? Amita has mentioned sharing roles as an example, but how do you react? How do you react when you hear constant comments that you just working part-time?
Okay, I'll give a go, and anyone else can jump in. Catherine, thanks for the question. My first reaction is, do you really have to answer that question when you hear any comment? Full stop. Because it's other person's view. And that goes back to my earlier discussion about absolutely being clear about what you stand for, why you are doing a part-time role, what is important in your life. That's why you are there. So I think if any comment comes up, and I think this is going by the International Women's Day theme about break the bias. So what drives that comment? What is the reason behind that? If an individual wants to know genuinely, please welcome a chance for a discussion, but then you decide whether you really need to answer that or not, and whether you really want yourself to be impacted by that comment. That's the tips, but happy to chat offline. Thank you.
Yeah, I do agree with Amita. I think, and also the other piece is, without knowing obviously which organization or which kind of institution that is, just really maybe challenging the kind of the policies, like, because it doesn't sound very appropriate to be asked that question to kind of start with. And I completely appreciate that there are different kind of different organizations out there. We all are different. People lead differently. So I think this is really a journey that we're all on. But just being mindful that you have every right to work part-time, if that works for you, for the organization. If, I mean, there's a contract that you enter in any case before you do so. So it's kind of a two-way. So I would just really put the wider team around you, the wider support mechanism, in a position where you actually get the support that you need to be able to answer that question. It didn't feel very appropriate for you to answer that question alone, or for you to feel that you have to.
Yeah, it comes back then to being confident, and probably, and standing up for yourself and being confident, and that's the right decision for you to work part-time, and that you still do a great job.
Can I actually add something to this, Lucy? Sorry. But I think I would like to bring that back to the speakers, because I feel this is really diversity, right? This is being a diverse employer, that you have the opportunity to work part-time and that it is accepted. And I feel that's, in a lot of cases, that's not really something that the employers of today see as diversity. Diversity in many cases is just female, male, and have some sort of percentage. But I think, like, having flexible work, part-time work, that's kind of, for me as well, what a diverse culture is or stands for.
Yeah, I'd love to chime in on that. And I actually texted Catherine privately. But in today's environment, a lot of part-time people get more done in their part-time hours than a lot of people who are working full-time. So one of the things I'd love to see the world shift to is value outcomes, not time spent. So I encourage you to think about the value you add to the company, not many hours you're burning. And a lot of people are burning out because we think 60, 70, 80, 90 hours a week is what's appropriate. But I know when I worked part-time, I was so hyper-focused that I literally got more done in 20 hours than I did in 40. So keep your chin up, show your value. Everybody will see it. It's all that'll matter.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, some of the best people that I've got working for me and most productive are part-timers. And I think we all know that working mothers become unbelievably good at juggling priorities. So if you need someone, to run an ACE event, working mother normally is, your go-to person. And I just think, I just think that it is possibly about just having a bit of thick skin, knowing that you add the value and just ignore it. Because, there'll always be people that comment on this, that, or the other. And I think, just reflecting, and I think as I've gotten older, I've probably cared less of what some people think or say, as long as I was confident I was doing a good job. Because you're never going to be able to stop those people. I think if there's a pattern, I think it's worth thinking of a tactful way of calling it out, maybe saying to some colleagues, I feel like, constantly get these comments. Is it just in my head, or are you hearing it too? And just calling it out, just saying, look, I've made this call to work part-time. My family's important. I'd appreciate if people respected it. Because I think, one of the really nice things that I've seen over the last 10 years probably is that is the increasing amount of men who are in that situation. Like, I've got people working with me who are the primary caregiver, or who, both parents working full time, but the wife has a more high-powered job. So if the nanny's sick, he has to go home. And that does wonders, because it does make other people sit up and notice that it's not just females do this. Similarly, I've got some men in my team who work part-time for other than family reasons, who just want to do other things, So I think as that becomes more mainstreamed, it will get better. But I hear what you're saying. I've been a working mum, and sometimes you just feel like they're treating you like you are there, hardly at all, really. Yeah.
Thank you. I hope that was helpful for everyone who is in that situation. and, you know, and for everyone who potentially wants to be in that situation in the future. So thank you for sharing that. Maybe we can cover Michael's question. So he works as a software engineer for a software startup, actually, and he can see that the majority of people applying in his for the jobs are actually male. So he's wondering what a strategy could be to attract a more diverse group applying for open roles.
I'm happy to take that since I've been in tech for 12 years. So there's actually a lot of amazing programs for, there's actually, I think, a couple in New Zealand for women in tech or girls in tech. So I actually spoke at an event on this, is just encouraging young women and women in career trajectories to actually start studying. The interesting thing to dispel the myth with some things tech is, as technology evolves, you don't have to have like developer degrees or whatnot to apply for those. So I do not have a degree in technology. So I just continue. Yes, girl boss, that's the one I was thinking. Thank you. So continuously doing that outreach as well, and making sure that each of us on this call, if you can choose a young woman or a young man to mentor in tech or any of the STEM fields, it's super helpful to just encourage that study of diverse topics as well. But I'll share, maybe if we have an email after this call, the organization's called EM360 also, that tries to wrangle more diverse recruits in tech, including people of color as well. But yes, girl boss, woo!
Thank you. Well, I'm really aware of time, so I'm thinking let's just wrap it up. And if any of you have additional questions, I suggest you just fire them through to us, to the young professional group, and we can collect those questions. We could potentially, you know, get some answers of the panelists, or maybe we as the young professionals can answer some of the questions or provide you with some support. So I would hand over back to Marcus.
Awesome, cool. Well, wow, what an event of, and also like the past 60 minutes. My notebook is full, and thanks a lot for all the good insights from the panelists, but also like all the questions you had. I think was really valuable. Like I would like to have done like a live cloud. I think it's called like a word of cloud, or cloud word, of just capturing like all the words and terms that have been used here, just to highlight the importance of a couple of those. I just want to mention a couple of such as like what is really important, I think, across the board here. I think there's like, we have heard of values, soft skills, but also technical skills, right? In particular, when it comes to communication and common sense, I think Amita, you talked about it. Then like changing career, right? So be open-minded and build your own credibility. I think that's really important, what Kate just mentioned here. But also like when it comes to credibility, right? So don't be afraid to be different, right? So be confident. So you are in the room to be different. And this is like something that really kind of I picked from like when Buku told us the story about the difference. And yeah, that's a lot of things going on here. And to be honest, Katja, like I think what you just said about like a bit nervous about this event. I think like everyone felt like this, and just breaking or like stating this up front, it's really important. Before we like wrap up the event as such, right? So please tell your friends and your colleagues about us, the young professionals. We're on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, like all the social media. and we would like to hear from you, like either like the questions that you still have, or if you want to become like a member, or you want to participate like in any programs that we run and launch as well, like in the upcoming weeks. Please feel free to reach out, and I would like to hand over now to Julia, just to give an update on a program that we're launching in April. And my last words are just thank you very much for your attendance, particularly like Katja, Amita, Kate, and Boko. Thanks a lot for being here. And over to you, Julia.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I can only confirm what Marco said. Lots of inspirational comments here. I'm at a whole list. So yeah, love what everyone said. So I will keep it actually short. So I'm Julia. I think I've met most of you already in person, but for those who I haven't, I mean, Kate, you're in the States, but yeah, I work for the German Chamber, and I think one thing that Burke said was be the change you want to see. And in 2018, we actually started the Young Professionals, and it was kind of an initiative because when I came to New Zealand, there was no platform to network and to really, you know, connect with your culture as such. So yeah, we started the Young Professionals, and one big part of the Young Professionals was how can we actually add value, where our mentor program comes in. So we started last year with a pilot program that was also in support of Astrid, who's here today as well. She helped us organize and build a framework for the mentor program. And it's really also about what Kate said. You need to seek information from others, and what better way to do that than, you know, having a mentor. So the feedback we received last year from our mentees was that it was such a good program to get an outside perspective from somebody who's not in your industry, who's not in your company. And so we decided to do like a fully fleshed version this year, starting off in April. So and doing it until December this year, rather than having it just for 4 months. And it is about getting our young professionals matched with the CEOs and GMs of the German Chamber network. It is really, we are here to get you in touch with those leaders and really get to help you in that space as well. God, I'm nervous now. All of a sudden, it turned into something. But yeah, so if you are interested in, highly recommend it. Thanks, Alicia. Yeah, if you are interested in the mentor program, feel free to apply for this. Just send us an email. It's an amazing opportunity. It's free, and we will match you with one of our CEOs. Because I mean, after all, business is all about human connections, and if you want to accelerate your career, you have to do it through human connections. So yeah, feel free to send us your email why you would be part of this program. And again, thank you everyone for joining us today, and thanks to our amazing panel speakers. And yeah, be the change you want to see. I love this one. So yeah, thank you everyone, and thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
It was lovely to meet all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.